This comes 2 days after Seoul and Washington's Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise began. The Korean won dips against the U.S. dollar, reaching the lowest since 2009. President Yoon vowed to monitor the potential ripple effects of the developments. The U.S. State Department voiced full support for Seoul's so-called Audacious plan of providing North Korea aid for denuclearization steps. President Yoon's National Security Advisor announced the country remains unfazed by the regime's recent rhetoric. Hello and welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Chen. Let's begin with our top story. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff reported just a few hours ago that Russian military aircraft entered South Korea's air defense identification zone without giving prior notice. The JCS did not provide details about the aircraft type nor how many, but said in a statement that the military code took tactical steps in preparation against possible accidents. It's the first time since late May that Russian aircraft have flown over this zone. Cadiz isn't governed by international laws like airspace, but is an area where pilots of foreign aircraft usually identify themselves before entering to prevent accidents. Moscow's defense ministry released a statement that its aircraft flew over the East Sea for 7 hours for a pre-planned flight. The announced flight comes after Seoul and Washington kicked off the Ulchi Freedom Shield joint drills. On day 2 of the Ulchi Freedom Shield, Seoul's defense minister visited a key command bunker complex and stressed the importance of a strong combined defense readiness. As part of the combined drill, the country's Navy conducted a hazardous leak training exercise near the East Coast. Bae Eun-ji has the details.
South Korea's defense minister Lee Jong-seop says that a strong combined defense readiness between South Korea and the U.S. is the foundation of the two countries' alliance. Lee made the remarks on Tuesday while visiting the command post Tango, a military bunker complex for South Korea and U.S. combined forces in the city of Seongnam. He also told South Korean and U.S. service members that they should train side by side and maintain what he called a fight-tonight readiness. He also said the people is the most important factor in winning a war, while referencing a line from the movie Top Gun, "It's not the plane, it's the pilot."
They say the modern war is a high-tech war, but it's people who operate those weapons. It's us.
Near the country's east coast, the South Korean Navy conducted a hazardous leak training exercise as part of the nationwide Ulchi Freedom Shield combined military drills. The training was carried out based on a simulation that a toxic substance was leaked due to a ballistic missile attack. The South Korean Navy First Fleet led the drill, along with the country's Marine Patrol units and government officials, to improve their readiness in case of an emergency situation. The Ulchi Freedom Shield, a large-scale combined military training operation taking place here in South Korea, will continue until September 1st. It's the first fully-fledged joint drill since 2018, after the two countries canceled some exercises and scaled down others in recent years, both to enhance diplomacy with Pyongyang and because of the pandemic. The South Korean military aims to strengthen its alliance with the U.S., as well as its combined defense readiness to counter threats from North Korea. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Seoul will not be affected by Pyongyang's response to its Audacious initiative and will continue to use the offer to promote North Korean denuclearization. Speaking to the Parliament's Steering Committee on Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol's National Security Advisor Kim Jong-un reaffirmed that the administration stands by its North Korea approach of providing corresponding rewards, economic and political, at each step of a phased process if the North commits to a genuine roadmap towards fully abandoning its nuclear programs. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, rejected Yoon's audacious initiative last week. On Seoul-Tokyo ties, Yoon's security advisor said the government looks to swiftly restore relations and seek future-oriented solutions based on universal values and norms. The U.S. State Department voiced full support for President Yoon's so-called audacious plan to give North Korea aid for denuclearization steps. According to Ned Price in briefing Monday, this is entirely consistent with America's approach to dealing with the regime's weapons and missile programs. The spokesperson pointed out the initiative could achieve practical, incremental progress toward complete denuclearization. He again urged Pyongyang to return to talks. Just days ago, however, the sister of North Korea's leader shot down President Yoon's plan in no uncertain terms, calling it the height of absurdity. The Chinese ambassador to South Korea called for the two countries to show mutual respect for core interests and key concerns. That's coming from Xing Haiming at a forum to commemorate the 30th anniversary of diplomatic ties. He stressed the two sides should work towards developing ties in a more mature, independent, and stable manner. The official also expressed hopes Seoul and Beijing can deal with disputes appropriately and show mutual understanding. A major issue involves South Korea's deployment of THAAD, which China regards as a security threat. On Wednesday, South Korea and China marked 30th anniversary of diplomatic ties. Relations have been quite bumpy the past few years, mostly over the deployment of a U.S. missile defense system. Min Soo-kyun provides a deeper analysis.
Back in 2016 July, Seoul and Washington announced plans to deploy the U.S. anti-ballistic missile defense system THAAD in South Korea.
The THAAD system will not be directed toward any third country, but will only be for any North Korean nuclear or missile threats. The deployment of THAAD will strengthen our defense capabilities with the U.S.
The decision drew an angry response from China, suspending group tours to South Korea, boycotting Korean products, and even banning K-pop music and TV dramas. In efforts to mend strained ties, the then South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa explained the government's position regarding the controversial anti-missile system. During a parliamentary audit, Kang said the government was not considering additional deployment of THAAD batteries, was not planning to participate in the U.S.-led missile defense network, and was not going to develop the trilateral security cooperation with the U.S. and Japan into a military alliance. This became known as the Three No's. China wants the current Yoon Suk-yeol administration to stay committed to this policy over fears that the THAAD system would undermine its security interests. In fact, it's made new claims, saying that South Korea had not only vowed to pursue the Three No's policy, but also pledged to limit the operation of the THAAD battery that's already in place. South Korea, however, has strongly dismissed those claims, stressing there was no formal agreement or promise made between the two countries, even under the previous administration. Professor Kim Ang-kwon from the Korean National Diplomatic Academy pointed out that China appears to be using the Three No's policy to its advantage.
China feels anxious about the deployment of THAAD. That's why it's trying to resolve the problem by claiming it's a promise or an agreement and not just a plan set by the former government.
He also said it's necessary for South Korea to clarify its position on THAAD and to hold regular talks with China on the issue.
Even if conflicts arise in the short term, discussing THAAD issues with China will be a necessary step in building an equal cooperative relationship in the long run.
While THAAD remains a litmus test for South Korea and China relations, both countries agree that this should no longer become a stumbling block to their bilateral ties. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
President Yoon called for prompt measures to address the weakening of the won against the greenback. This comes as the exchange rate rose to another 13-year high on Tuesday. Choi Min-jung helps us look beyond the digits.
The South Korean currency has plunged yet again against the U.S. dollar, setting a low not seen since 2009. President Yoon Suk-yeol addressed the matter on Tuesday and vowed to monitor the potential ripple effects of the weakening won.
우리 경제의 대외적인 재무 건전성에는 큰 문제가 없지만 이것이 수입 물가를 상승시키고 국제 수지를 악화해서 우리 시장에 부정적인 영향을 미칠 수가 있기 때문에 이 부분들을 국민들이 불안해하시지 않도록 잘 관리를 해 나가겠습니다.
According to the senior presidential secretary for press affairs, Yoon called the current global and domestic macroeconomic situation grave due to the weakening won and widening trade deficit. The secretary added Yoon asked officials to work toward minimizing the risks.
The president urged relevant ministries to closely monitor the economic situation and stressed they must ensure there isn't the slightest gap in their response for the stability of people's livelihoods.
South Korea's foreign exchange authorities also warned against any speculative bets in the currency market. This comes as Tuesday's session opened with the exchange rate passing 1,341 and closed with the won trading at 1,345.5 against the greenback, the lowest in over 13 years. Local capital market firm Hana Securities predicts the won to depreciate even further to around 1,351. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Inflation in South Korea is at its highs not seen in over 2 decades. Consumers expect the trend to persist in the coming months, but less so, which means it might be close to the peak. Ji-young explains further.
South Korea could soon be over the worst of the high inflation. Consumers in the country are still anticipating high inflation in the coming months, but those expectations are lower than last month, with the expected inflation figure dropping for the first time in 8 months. According to the Bank of Korea's survey of roughly 2,500 households in August, which was released on Tuesday, expected inflation for the next 12 months stood at 4.3%. That's down 0.4 percentage points from the all-time high figure recorded in July. The Bank of Korea attributed the fall to an expected peak in consumer prices.
Expected inflation edged down with the government's announcements and expectations that global consumer prices will peak in the second half of this year and oil prices will fall.
The think tank Korea Economic Research Institute says in order to curb consumer prices, it is important to stabilize the expected inflation rate. According to its analysis, when the expected inflation rises by 1 percentage point, it leads to a 0.67 percentage point rise in the actual consumer price index. The think tank also says if the expected inflation settles down, the inflation is likely to peak in September at 7%, then start to fall. South Korea's inflation hit a new record in July as prices rose at the fastest pace in nearly 24 years. It was the second month in a row that consumer prices have risen on year by more than 6%, which is far higher than the government's target of 2%. And one expert says high inflation is to remain for a while.
The inflation rate will go down sometime in October after Chuseok, but I don't think the inflation rate will go back down to Bank of Korea's target rate of 2%, and we will probably have high prices and higher than 2% inflation rate until at least the end of the year. It'll probably be sometime early next year when the prices fall back down to pre-pandemic levels.
Ji-young, Arirang News.
The nation's household debt rose to a new high in Q2, but the pace of growth slowed down mainly because of rising interest rates. According to the Bank of Korea, household debt surpassed 1,869 trillion won, or at the current rate about $1.39 trillion, the highest since the BOK started compiling related figures in 2003. It was up by almost 6.5 trillion won on quarter. This represents a slowdown in borrowing due to rising interest rates, tougher regulations on lending, and a decline in the number of housing transactions. The figure includes mortgages at over half the total, plus other debts to financial institutions and purchases on credit. The nation's daily COVID-19 tally exceeded 150,000, but authorities expect the number of new infections to start declining this week. The government plans to roll out updated vaccine that's more effective against variants. Shin-young has the latest.
The peak of the latest COVID-19 wave in South Korea is getting closer. The country reported 150,258 new COVID-19 infections on Tuesday. A similar level was recorded when case numbers peaked 2 weeks ago. The number of critically ill patients stand at 487, while COVID-19 related deaths reached 52. Health authorities say the COVID-19 resurgence seems to be reaching its peak, and the number of new cases is expected to turn to a decline either this week or next. However, severe cases and deaths could continue to increase.
The number of COVID-19 related deaths and critically ill patients are expected to increase for around 2 to 3 weeks as these figures take time to appear, unlike new COVID-19 cases.
Ahead of the coming fall semester, the same officials said schools will hold in-person classes even if case numbers surge. This comes under the government's efforts to support a transition back to normal life. Instead, it's planning to restrict extracurricular and outdoor activities that increase the risk of COVID-19 infection. In the meantime, there are plans to announce an updated COVID-19 vaccine next week, which is more effective against Omicron variants like BA4 and BA5. 신하영, Arirang News.
Turning our focus to the war in Ukraine, a local military official says around 9,000 of its soldiers have died. According to the UN, the number of civilian deaths is well over 5,000. Meanwhile, the U.S. believes Russia is preparing to step up attacks on civilians. Kim Hyun-sung brings the updates.
The war in Ukraine nears the 6-month mark, but is showing little signs of abating. The death toll rises in Ukraine's second-largest city of Kharkiv. Rocket shellings on a hostel in the city last week killed at least 25 people and injured about 40.
I heard a wish, opened my mouth, and that's when everything started collapsing. Then I opened my eyes. There's darkness, dust, and flashlights. I got out on my own and called for help.
On the night that Kharkiv dormitories were shelled, 20 people with mind blast trauma were taken to our hospital in the evening and in the morning.
The United Nations says that 5,587 civilians have been killed since the onset of the war, while near 8,000 have been injured. But some say that this number severely underestimates the actual count. Casualties have risen among troops as well. AP News quoted Ukraine's military chief on Monday local time, who said Russia's invasion has killed around 9,000 Ukrainian soldiers. According to Reuters on Monday, the United States has received further information about Russia stepping up its attacks. One official said that the U.S. has intelligence that the Russian military is planning to strike Ukrainian civilian and governmental facilities. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
This summer's record-breaking drought felt in much of the northern hemisphere is taking an economic toll as well. Some of the hardest hit areas include the U.S., parts of Europe, and China. Lee Seung-jae has the full story.
Many U.S. cities rely heavily on major rivers, which supply them not just with water, but also electricity. With record drought reported in western regions of the U.S., the Colorado River, which supplies many western states with water and electricity, is running dry. The river, which flows from the Rocky Mountains to the desert plains of America's Southwest, provides water to 40 million people in the country, as well as Mexico. It also supports a $15 billion a year agriculture industry. However, with states unable to agree on a plan to ration water drawn from the parched Colorado River, hydroelectric turbines may stop turning, major cities may be forced to restrict water usage, and farmers may have to leave their land to turn to dust. A drought in Europe is also affecting the economy there, as ships are having difficulty moving through major waterways due to low water levels. Such is the case over in Germany on River Rhine, which is a major shipping artery in the region. Falling water levels means less freight can be transported, leading to delays and higher costs. The river runs through Germany's industrial heartland from the Swiss Alps to the North Sea, carrying everything from grain to chemicals and coal. But the low water volume means ships can only load 30 to 40% capacity to avoid running aground. Economists say the disruption could impact the country's economic growth by as much as half a percentage point. Record high temperatures and record low rainfall in west-central China have crippled hydropower generation and prompted the shutdown of many factories there, a blow to a Chinese economy that is already seeing stagnant consumer spending and a deeply troubled real estate market due to the prolonged COVID-19 pandemic. The Sichuan province, one of China's most populous and fast-growing industrial bases in recent years, typically generates more than 3/4 of its electricity from its huge dams. However, with low water levels, the dams cannot generate enough electricity even for Sichuan's own needs, forcing factories there to close up for up to a week at a time. With little rainfall during fall and winter, many of the major economies hit by the summer drought fear the worst is yet to come. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, South Korea is becoming one of the best places in the world for startups. Since 2016, the government has been running a special program to attract foreign startups. Shin Se-byuk zooms in on the efforts to help propel the nation into a startup hub in Asia.
South Korea is becoming a launchpad for global startups to expand in Asia. With the goal of becoming a global startup hub, since 2016, the Startups Ministry, together with the National IT Industry Promotion Agency, have been supporting selected global startups as part of the K-Startup Grant Challenge. Here in Pangyo Techno Valley, dubbed the Silicon Valley of Korea, global startups are looking to expand across the Asian market through a global platform offered by the South Korean government. And it's also here that this year's 54 selected startups from across the world are given various benefits.
From housing support to investment linkages, we work together with local and related agencies to ensure the selected startups settle in South Korea.
From AI to logistics, these companies are from different industries, but what they have in common is that they see opportunities for doing business in South Korea thanks to an environment that's supportive to startups.
Fortunate to get a lot of great advice, learn the ins and outs of operating a business in Korea from legal advisors, accountants, others on the ground here.
One of last year's participants also found the program beneficial as a foreigner and as a new startup.
So those programs are very beneficial for us to get the funding and also get the help. So this is, I think, one of the competitive edge of Korea.
These benefits are attracting more and more startups from across the world. And as of 2021, a total of 309 firms have taken advantage of the accelerator program, and almost 50% of those companies have established a corporation. Besides the KSGC program, Korea is ramping up to further improve the country's startup ecosystem with many state-funded programs such as the SBA loan program available. The government is also seeking to implement tax breaks and improve visa regulations for entrepreneurs from abroad. All of these measures are making South Korea even more attractive as a global startup destination. According to a report from a U.S. research firm Startup Genome, South Korea's capital Seoul ranks 10th among the best places for startups and is only the second Asian city to make the list after China's Beijing. This is an improvement of 6 places from the year before. Despite this rapid growth, however, experts say language barrier issues, as most of the work is done through Korean, can slow the country from becoming a global startup incubator, and that this issue needs to be addressed by hiring workers who are fluent in English if South Korea is to climb up the list further. 신새벽, Arirang News.
Blackpink's new song Pink Venom racked up the most views on YouTube for any music video within first 24 hours of release with 90.4 million. According to YouTube on Monday, this record makes Pink Venom the 3rd biggest music video debut of all time. It even breaks the group's previous record set in 2020 of 86.3 million views for How You Like That. Pink Venom reached 100 million views 29 hours after its release and topped Spotify's global top 50 chart, making Blackpink the first female K-pop act to achieve this feat. The girls will perform Pink Venom at the 2022 MTV Video Music Awards. Their second studio album, Born Pink, will be released on September 16th.
Hello, I'm Ijeon with the latest weather updates, filling in for Lee Seung-min. Wet and murky skies in the capital region turned into a bright and pleasant afternoon. But southern provinces have been seeing on and off heavy rain, and that showers are forecast to continue into tomorrow afternoon. Well, today is Cheoseok, the second autumn season term on the traditional calendar. So things will turn to a more autumn-like note than summer starting tomorrow. And I'm sure those on Jeju Island cannot wait for this year's summer to end. It's been a historic, searing summer day and night. And Jeju City had a record-breaking 52 days of tropical nights as of this Tuesday, and it's very likely the island will have a couple more. Well, highs in most areas will be below 30 degrees Celsius tomorrow afternoon with more clouds. And it looks like Chungcheongdo and Gyeongsang-Pukto provinces will have another round of rain at the end of the work week. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
Time to wrap things up. As always, thank you for staying with us.